Around the world, 9 million criminals behind bars. Armed robbers, rapists and murderers. Most surrender to incarceration, but some fight back and escape. Tonight, a great train robber makes a great escape.
The prisoners all shouting out to one another out the cell windows, "Well done, boys!"
In America, a prison nurse falls for a felon and springs him from jail.
You can talk you out of your underwear, I'm telling you.
And in Australia, an escape-proof bunker is no match for Mad Dog Cox.
When he had a weapon, his behaviour was absolutely uncontrollable.
This programme contains recreations. The prison breaks are real. England, 1965. Britain's answer to Alcatraz, Wandsworth, the largest prison in London.
Wandsworth was a particularly Victorian, elderly, horrible, smelly, disgusting prison with particularly unpleasant warders.
Prisoners are in lockdown 23 hours a day, allowed only 1 hour of exercise in the yard, and even then, under strict supervision.
Really tough, yeah. People have no idea. Wandsworth was one of the tough prisons.
Wandsworth is surrounded by sheer stone walls, 7 metres high. But in 1965, one man was determined to take them on and climb his way to freedom. Ronald Arthur Biggs had been incarcerated for his part in the Great Train Robbery. In the biggest heist England had ever seen, the 15-member gang made off with more than £2.5 million. Most was never recovered.
And he wasn't the one of the top ringleaders or nothing. He was just like, but lucky to be invited on it.
Not so luckily, and despite his minor role in the robbery, Biggs received the same sentence as gang leaders, 30 years.
It's horrendous, wasn't it? Everyone was shocked by that. Even the police was shocked by the length of sentence. They made an example of him.
And the 30 years each got, most of the public were really upset about it.
Prior to the robbery, Biggs had been just a small-time crook and, by all accounts, a below-average one.
Petty thief, very unsuccessful, breaking into chemists at nights and that sort of stuff. But his main job was as a carpenter.
Arriving at Wandsworth, Biggs initially had no intention of escape.
He thought, if I keep my head down and just do my time, I'll probably get some good remission for good behaviour.
But his hopes were soon scuttled. An escape attempt by another gang member led to even tighter security measures for the Great Train Robbers. Biggs sent a stream of letters to politicians, complaining about his situation.
They had a light on his cell that was on 24/7, so he did put in a letter, rather than keeping me in prison, you're doing everything you can to push me over that wall.
Biggs had been pushed too far, and was driven to a desperate decision, to take on the Wandsworth Wall.
Oh, with a 30-year sentence, who wasn't keen to get out of Wandsworth? It's as simple as that.
But he knew he couldn't do it alone.
There was a mate of Biggs's inside Wandsworth who was particularly shocked at the 30 years that Biggs had had and made it his avowed intent to get him out of Wandsworth.
Shortly due for release from prison, Paul Seaborn was the ideal accomplice. He agreed to coordinate Biggs's escape on the condition his mate, Eric Flower, also got sprung. May 1965, Paul Seaborn is released from prison. With part of Biggs's split from the Great Train Robbery, he buys and modifies a large furniture van.
They got a little spring in the roof where they could raise a section of the roof another 5 feet.
Seaborn would then toss 2 rope ladders over the wall into the exercise yard for Biggs and Flower to climb their way to freedom. On July the 8th, Seaborn gets word to Biggs and Flower to greenlight the breakout. At 3 p.m, the would-be escapees commence their exercise hour in E Yard. They anxiously and surreptitiously scan the wall for signs of movement. From the top of a nearby block of flats, Seaborn scours the yard with binoculars. He sights Biggs and Flower, both with their prison jackets slung over their shoulders. The signal they're ready to go.
Of course, nowadays, the prison security is a lot tighter. You wouldn't find prisoners who are high escape risks exercising in the same yard with other prisoners.
With only a 1-hour window to complete their plan, Seaborn and an accomplice in another car head towards the prison.
And they eventually pulled up alongside the wall of the E yard and threw a rope ladder over the wall down the other side.
Finally, after a tension-packed wait, Biggs and Flowers see the ladders and make a frantic dash towards them. Two prison guards spot them and give chase. They've got a lot of ground to cover. Is their prison break over before it starts? The Rowan County Courthouse in the southern US state of Tennessee, 2005. A busy court handling hundreds of criminal cases. Within its walls, offenders awaiting trial are kept in secure cells. 33-year-old George Hyatt, a violent career criminal, has already escaped custody 4 times and is serving a 32-year sentence for assault and robbery.
George Hyatt was a thief, just to put it lightly. George was a drug addict and then graduated, if you might say, and on to armed robbery. And he was a thorn in the local law enforcement side.
He had to fight for what he wanted most of all his life. He is kind of aggressive person because of the family that he was raised up in. There was alcohol and drugs all through it.
31-year-old Jennifer Forsyth Taylor was a prison nurse. Married with 3 young children, she appeared to have a perfect life. But when she met George in Tiptonville State Penitentiary, her life took a dangerous turn.
George had become ill, and he went to the infirmary to be checked out. And he looked at her and he said he fell in love with her. He is a very handsome man. And he's got smooth talk. He can talk you out of your underwear, I'm telling you.
And it didn't take long for George to talk his way into Jennifer's heart.
They flirted around for a while, and then eventually he started going to the infirmary to have sex with her.
Jennifer fell in love, and she would do anything for George at the time.
He knew that he had control over her in terms of her mental state, and that he could convince her to do just about anything.
When their dangerous liaison was discovered, Jennifer was sacked to disgrace. But love can be blind.
Jennifer left her children, her babies, and a husband for a man locked up in prison.
Jennifer married Hyatt inside the prison on the 21st of May, 2005. 3 weeks later, he heads back to court to face more robbery charges.
He had talked to Jennifer and told her, listen, I've already got 32 years. If they give me more than another 20-year sentence on top of that, then you gotta get me out of here. She said, yeah, I'm gonna get you out. No matter what it takes, I'm gonna get you out because I can't live without you.
I don't think George fell in love with her. I think George needed someone. He found a weakness in Jennifer, and he used that weakness for his ability to be able to escape.
Hyatt's plan? An armed breakout in broad daylight. His accomplice? His new and devoted wife, Jennifer. Sydney, Australia, 1974. Long Bay Correctional Complex. Incarcerating 900 of the state's most hardened criminals. Amongst the worst, 27-year-old Russell Cox, also known as Mad Dog.
There was a number of stories why he was called Mad Dog, and one of the stories were that when he had a weapon, his behaviour was absolutely uncontrollable. Just like a dog that's mad.
Arrested on an armed robbery rampage, he was sentenced to 14 years.
He was a particularly vicious criminal. We always considered that any person that committed an armed robbery was a potential murderer. And Cox had exhibited his willingness to discharge his firearm on a number of occasions.
Desperate to escape his harsh confines, Mad Dog hooked up with 2 other armed robbers. The prisoners spent their time searching for ways to leave the fortress. In 1975, without the added security of modern screening and metal detectors, Cox had managed to smuggle in a pistol. He was armed again, and on August the 8th at 2:45, the Mad Dog and his pack made their move.
I was basically in the visiting area at that time. When the inner gates opened and the truck came through, there seemed to be an excessive amount of noise and yelling, and I came out of the visits area and was confronted by Cox and another fella.
Caught by surprise, Steve Tanday and several other guards are swiftly overpowered by the fierce trio.
They then ordered me to lie down on the floor in the gatehouse. They then put a gun to the back of my head and threatened to blow our heads off unless he unlocked the safe holding the firearms.
Grabbing 2 Smith & Wesson handguns from the safe, Mad Dog and his accomplices take Officer Cafe hostage, making him a human shield. They commandeer the prison truck and gun it for the gates.
I heard the outer gates open and the truck drove out, obviously with the inmates on board.
As the alarm went off, with bullets flying, the 3 desperados with their hostage on board make their mad dash for freedom. At the Rowan County Courthouse in Tennessee, George Hyatt is in court on robbery charges, watched by his new bride, former prison nurse Jennifer. What happens next will surprise everyone with its ferocity. After hearing George plead guilty to the charge, Jennifer rushes from the courthouse into the car park. This was their only chance. She knew once Hyatt was back in prison, breaking him out would be impossible. It was now or never. Wearing shackles and with a guard on either side, George is marched out of the building towards a waiting prison van. Leaping from a stolen 4-wheel drive, Jennifer pulls a gun on the guards.
Shoot him! Shoot him!
The bullet strikes Wayne Cotton Morgan in the stomach. Hyatt breaks away. Still shackled, Jennifer helps him into the vehicle. The second correctional officer, Larry Porky Harris, returns fire. He empties his gun, firing 6 shots at George and Jennifer. As the Hyatts speed away, Harris picks up his partner's weapon and continues to shoot at the fleeing vehicle. With a gunshot wound to the stomach, Wayne Morgan lies bleeding on the asphalt.
It was a deadly and unconventional jailbreak, bold in its execution, brazen in its calculation.
The radio call was to Keystone officers, you need to respond to the courthouse. There had been a shooting. You have an officer down. And when we got there, we seen the correctional van, saw Cotton laying on the ground. What I tell him then is, Cotton, we're going to get him. We'll catch him.
Law enforcement officers flood the area. A massive manhunt begins. The Sheriff's Department, State Troopers, the FBI, and the US Marshals form a joint task force.
When you know that a fellow officer's died, then you get a response that is unreal.
Tragically, Officer Wayne Morgan dies on his way to hospital.
Jennifer Hyatt allegedly shot and killed a corrections officer as her husband George Hyatt was being moved from a county courthouse.
Jennifer Hyatt, a nurse with no criminal record, is now a wanted murderer.
George masterminded the whole plan, and that there was indeed a very elaborate plan. You typically don't see that type of activity from someone with no criminal history. And in fact, just a few short months before, was a staff member working at the jail herself.
The Hyatts' faces are splashed in newspapers and on television screens throughout the country. They're labelled the new Bonnie and Clyde. The stolen vehicle is found abandoned in a car park, only a short distance from the courthouse. Evidence of the shootout is clear. Police investigators examine the car and find blood, a lot of it. One or both of the Hyatts has been shot. As police troll the highways, members of George's family plead for the pair to turn themselves in.
If you're listening, George, all I want to tell you is we love you. Please give me a call or give Mama a call. You know, it's time for this to end. You know, one innocent man done lost his life, and let's not make it two.
After stealing another car and heading for Cincinnati, the Hyatts' first priority is freeing George from his shackles and prison uniform. They drive almost 300 miles to Erlanger, Kentucky, where they hole up in a hotel. Jennifer is bleeding profusely. A bullet has gone straight through her thigh. She uses her nurse's training to staunch the flow of blood. It's not the marital bliss they'd hoped for. With her gunshot wound, Jennifer is lying in agony beside her new groom. They had no idea their precious honeymoon was going to be short-lived. London's Wandsworth Prison, 1965. A grim fortress surrounded by huge stone walls. Escape was unheard of. But great train robber Ronald Biggs and prison mate Eric Flower have other ideas.
I'll take me out to them. My only upset is I wasn't there to get over the bat and ball with them. That's the war, of course.
July the 8th at 3:05 p.m. Biggs and fellow escapee Eric Flower are making a mad dash across the exercise yard towards rope ladders slung over the wall by an accomplice. With two prison guards bearing down on them, their chances of escape are looking slim. But suddenly, a couple of lifers with nothing to lose tackle the guards to the ground.
Two of Biggs's mates were paid £500 each to get in the way of the two warders who were in the yard so that there was nobody climbing up the ladder to stop them escaping.
Biggs and Flower finally commence the 7-metre climb.
It's very unsophisticated, very simple, and it relied on timing and the fact that there were only two warders who were in a position to alert the authorities as to what had happened.
Two other prisoners see an opportunity and also make a bid for freedom, scaling the ladders after Biggs and Flower. With alarm bells sounding and officers flooding into the yard, the four escapees reach the top of Wandsworth Wall. Seabourn's modified removal truck is waiting below. They make the 3-metre drop, and with pandemonium breaking out behind them in the prison, they clamber down the back of the truck to a waiting getaway vehicle. The car takes off into the streets of southeast London.
Well, the screws are fuming because it's made them look idiots. Whereas the prisoners are all dancing with joy. all shouting out to one another out the cell windows, "Well done, boys!" Everything, yeah, knowing full well it's getting up the prison officer's nose. I loved it.
But Biggs had a massive problem on his mind. Where do you go when you're the most wanted man in England? Sydney's Long Bay Prison. Taking a guard hostage, infamous hold-up man Mad Dog Cox and his 2 accomplices have hijacked a prison truck and busted out of jail.
Once outside the prison gates, the truck was fired upon from the watchtowers. It was then rammed by another vehicle before the men were recaptured.
I came out of the gatehouse after the actual event, and I could see that they were being led up the avenue by and restrained by other officers.
The Mad Dog was back on a leash with a life sentence for attempted escape. This time, he was locked up in Kittingle, the special security wing of Long Bay. Dreaded by prisoners, it was dubbed the Electronic Zoo.
Well, that's basically what it was. All the movements were controlled by switches and bells and whistles. An inmate had come out of his cell and the door had closed behind him. Then another grill had opened, the door had closed behind it. Then he'd go into the workshop and that door couldn't be opened unless that door was locked.
Designed for sensory deprivation, only 35 of the worst offenders were kept captive within its walls.
It was deemed to be escape-proof. It was a multi-million-dollar concrete bunker. And it was basically like an atomic bomb shelter. There was no natural light or fresh air got into the place.
Prison officers believed this was the perfect cage for the dangerous Mad Dog.
But he didn't stay there very long, though. That was the problem.
Despite the ultra-high security of Kittingle, Cox again managed to procure an escape tool, this time a hacksaw blade.
Could have been in the lining of a book, it could have been in the... Even though particular measures was taken about the food intake from coming into Kittingle at the time.
Day after day, with the patience of a wild animal waiting for its chance to pounce, Mad Dog hacked away at the bars above his exercise yard.
When the officer's attention was diverted, he would run up and put a few saws in the bar.
At the end of each day, he covered his tracks with masking tape. The Mad Dog was determined to break free from his electronic zoo. Erlanger, Kentucky, 2005. On the run and holed up in a hotel, George Hyatt and his new bride, Jennifer, have just spent their first night together. As a nurse, compassion was Jennifer's trade. As an accessory to escape, she has killed a prison officer in cold blood and taken a bullet in the thigh. First thing next morning, nursing Jennifer's gunshot wound, the Hyatts ditch their car and order a cab. Suspecting nothing, driver Mike Wages spends the next 2 hours driving them north, dropping them at a cheap motel on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Swallowing a story that their IDs were lost in a car crash, Wages checks the couple in under his own name.
About 8 o'clock that evening, I received a telephone call from one of my peers in Cincinnati saying that a cab driver had called and said that he believed that he had taken the Hyatts to Columbus, Ohio.
The US Marshals and Columbus Police scramble a team of heavily armed officers.
I was certainly concerned for the safety of my deputy marshals and, of course, for the Columbus Police Department SWAT team. The murder weapon had not been discovered. I thought more likely than not it would end in violence.
Supervisory Deputy John Boland meets with his team to devise the plan.
The room was registered under the name of it's definitely them. The room is on the second deck, right here on the corner, 236B.
The SWAT team surround the motel, cutting off all means of escape. Deputy US Marshal Nicole Ralston heads to the reception desk.
I went inside the hotel and talked to the desk clerk. I wanted to verify that that room was registered to the cab driver's name, and it was.
We made sure that there were no motel guests in the adjoining rooms, and our perimeter personnel kept anybody from coming into our perimeter. We stacked with the Columbus Police Department SWAT team. There were 5 of us on the landing up on the 2nd floor just outside the room. In a case like this where someone's actually been killed, you know that the threat of violence is real because it's already been perpetrated.
The Hyatts are oblivious to the SWAT team poised outside their door. As team leader, John Bowling orders Nicole Ralston to call the room.
If George was to answer, she was to just act as though she was part of the motel staff. But if Jennifer was to answer, I wanted her to instruct Jennifer that the room was surrounded. There was absolutely nowhere that they could escape to.
I was actually surprised that somebody answered the phone, and it was a female. She said hello, and I wanted to immediately find out whether these were the right people. So all I said was, Jennifer? And she said yes.
With no way out, the fugitive couple are trapped in their room. Their options? Surrender or shoot it out. Australia, New South Wales. The Kittingle Special Security Wing of Sydney's Long Bay Jail, the dreaded electronic zoo. Russell Mad Dog Cox, determined to escape, soars through the bars above his exercise yard. On November the 4th, 1977, he's ready to make his move. Deliberately leaving his shoes behind in the yard, he persuades the guard to let him go back for them. Left to his own devices, he commences his escape. He jams a ping-pong bat in a crevice in the wall. Using it as a foothold, he shimmies his way up.
Up he went, the bar was cut through. It had been packed with soap or something like that. He pulled the bar down, straight out, dropped straight down, a distance of, again, probably 12 feet to the ground, and then scaled to 15-foot barbed wire fences. And away, gone.
A prison officer spots Cox, but it's too late. Dodging bullets once again, Mad Dog escapes the up till now inescapable Kittingle.
He escaped from the maximum security Kittingle unit of Long Bay Jail. Photos show how Cox removed an iron bar from the top of the prison exercise yard. While warders were operating high security doors, he climbed up with a hacksaw. He was shot at as he fled, but managed to climb over these 2 wire fences.
We considered that he was of great threat to society because he was known to be armed and a person who was known to discharge the weapon.
Cox had a reputation of always being armed, even when jogging.
A nationwide search is mounted, but Mad Dog Cox is nowhere to be found. Like a chameleon, Cox constantly changed his appearance. He grew beards, changed his hair colour, and dressed in different styles.
He would change his whereabouts on numerous occasions. He didn't stay any extended period in any one spot.
The last confirmed sighting of the alleged criminal mastermind was at a food store in Brisbane in 1983. Since then, there have been regular unconfirmed sightings in other states.
He went to England, he went to Germany, he went to New Zealand.
This crafty fugitive travelled the world, evading the law. It seemed no one was going to put Mad Dog back in his cage. England, 1965. Having just broken out of London's Wandsworth Prison, great train robber Ronald Biggs and fellow escapee Eric Flower are holed up in a safe house. Biggs is the most wanted man in the country. His best bet is to flee England, but how?
It took time to get their passports together for both the 2 people and to arrange transport out, but we couldn't go through any airport or station with their photographs or their put pictures in there because they wanted pictures of them everywhere.
Their solution? A fishing boat. Biggs and Flower are spirited across the Channel to France, where both fugitives undergo plastic surgery to change their appearances.
It made a lot of sense at the time. I mean, they were even talking about removing their fingerprints.
Unrecognisable from the mugshots, they pondered where to head next. Biggs was sorely missing his wife, Charmaine, and his 2 children.
That if he was ever going to link up with Charmaine again, it had to be somewhere where the children wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb.
Both fugitives agreed on the same place, Australia. Not a cheap option, and one which would drain the remainder of Biggs's loot.
I would say that the funding for his escape, which probably cost between £40,000 and £50,000 in total, including all the plastic surgery, all the flights, the funding for paying people to get him out of Wandsworth Prison, for looking after him for several weeks in the immediate aftermath of the escape. All that cost around £40,000 to £50,000.
The Biggs family settle in Melbourne, with Ronnie resuming his original trade of carpentry. In 1969, Eric Flower is captured by Australian police, and the heat is turned on Biggs.
Squads of detectives have had to be taken off local inquiries to take part in the hunt for the train robber. Detectives carry a dossier of photographs.
In 1970, with police closing in on his wife and children, Ronnie was forced to flee to Rio, leaving his family behind.
He always had in the back of his mind to get back to his family at some point, but he knew that now that Charmaine had been found with the kids in Australia, you know, they would be on the family's case 24/7.
Former family man Biggs finds himself a girlfriend, a local stripper, and settles into a seedy hotel room. Desperate for cash, he tries to sell his story to a local newspaper. Biggs is double-crossed. The paper alerts Scotland Yard, who pounce. The great train robber is in handcuffs again, but not for long.
Scotland Yard thought that they can, you know, walk into Brazil, and they thought this is a banana republic. We can just walk in and wave our Scotland Yard badges and everyone's going to bow to us. What they didn't realise is that Brazil was under a very severe military dictatorship in those days. So the moment that it was announced that my father was arrested in Brazil, the Brazilian government stepped in and said, hold the phone, you know, you can't do this, you know.
Under Brazilian law, Biggs cannot be extradited to Britain, and with his girlfriend Rambunda now pregnant with Michael, he cannot be expelled. He's released, but as a convicted felon, he's not permitted to work in Brazil. The ever-resourceful Biggs finds a solution. He makes ends meet, exploiting his newfound status as a minor celebrity.
My father never wanted to be the celebrity criminal. It was never his aim to be in a public eye, but journalists just kept coming left, right and centre and offering him money.
It looked like the great train robber was living the life of Riley, but he was set to take a tumble. There was a price on his head, and, unbeknownst to Ronnie Biggs, bounty hunters were on their way to claim the reward. Australia, 1988. Mad Dog Cox, master criminal, on the run for 11 years. Police were beginning to think he'd gone for good. Then, a break.
Police received a call warning them that 3 people in 2 cars were acting suspiciously at the Westfield Shopping Town car park and that they were armed.
We then attended at the vehicle, which was open, and we discovered that there was identification within the Commodore.
The ID cards found in the car belonged to Ray Denning, well known to police, and a criminal associate of Russell Cox.
Raymond John Denning is equally notorious, both for his history of violent crime and his 3 escapes from jail.
Moments later, Denning, accompanied by Cox, heads back to the vehicle. Officer David Brodie has no idea Mad Dog, one of Australia's most wanted, is only metres away.
I got out of my vehicle with a shotgun, and he's looked at me, and I could see him driving virtually at me, and he's pulled a revolver out.
In the centre of the packed car park, a shootout erupted as a Ford Fairmont tried to break through the police cordon. 9 shots hit the Ford, shattering the windscreen and causing the driver to ram into a brick wall. Inside, another escapee on the most wanted list.
Cox and Denning are stunned by the impact. Brodie pins down Cox before another shot is fired.
The shootout took less than 20 minutes, but it was a life and death struggle for both the police and their quarry.
We knew he was associated with Ray Denning, but we had no idea of his identity at that stage.
The rampaging driver is now in custody. Police press him to identify himself.
Word for word, he said, "You'll be jumping through hoops when you find out who I am."
His fingerprints were sent off for immediate identification. He was identified as Russell Mad Dog Cox.
I was absolutely elated. The fact that I had a hand in apprehending Cox was very, very satisfying to myself at the time, and also, obviously, the other members because of the nature of the person and who he was.
But, in an ironic legal twist, Mad Dog's 11 years on the run were counted as part of his overall sentence.
We believe he should have done his full time in jail. That should not have included 11 years on the run.
On December the 8th, 1994, after serving only 18 years of his 29-year sentence, Russell Cox was released.
How's it feel, Russell? Happy to be free?
Russell Cox is like a leopard who can't change his spots, and I'm of the opinion that Cox is a very dark colour as far as comparison to a leopard's concerned.
Once known as Australia's most wanted man, Russell Cox now lives the life of an unknown at an undisclosed location in Queensland, Australia. However, he remains under police surveillance at all times. Cox's accomplice, Ray Denning, was released from prison in 1993 and died soon after from a heroin overdose. Columbus, Ohio, 2005. George and Jennifer Hyatt, holed up in a motel room, are unaware that they are completely surrounded by US Marshals and a police SWAT team. Having already shot and killed an officer during George's escape from custody, the Hyatts are believed to be armed and dangerous.
I was actually surprised that somebody answered the phone, and it was a female. And I wanted to immediately find out whether these were the right people. So all I said was, "Jennifer?" And she said yes. I said, "Well, my name is Nikki Ralston. I'm with the United States Marshal Service." I said, "Your room is surrounded with law enforcement personnel. We don't want anybody else to get hurt. So I need to give you some instructions on what to do." She said, "Okay." I said, "George is there, right?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "You need to get George, and you guys need to surrender to the cops that are waiting for you outside."
Surprisingly, after a few moments, the door opened, and there was Jennifer. We had her place our hands behind her head and walk back to the sound of our voice.
I need you to back up to the door. Your back cut back. Keep coming, yes. Keep coming to the door.
She did that, and when she crossed the threshold of the door, a SWAT officer and myself grabbed her and took her into custody.
It was very strange. She wasn't even concerned much for her gunshot wound. It was just all about him. It's all about George.
Cornered in the room, the police don't believe that George will go down without a fight.
We captured George's attention. He answered when we called for him.
George Hyatt, put your shirt over your head. Your shirt over your head. Put your hands behind your head, sir. Now I need you to back up to the door. Your back cut back. Keep coming, yes. Keep coming to the door, sir. That's right, keep coming.
When he got to the threshold of the door, we asked him to get down on all fours and to lay flat on the ground, where we took him into custody and searched him, of course, right away for a weapon.
We are very pleased to announce tonight that George and Jennifer Hyatt have been apprehended in Columbus, Ohio.
Actually, the guard that was killed, my brother liked him. He was really good to my brother. He was nice to my brother. He's cried over that. That's the main reason he turned himself in. He went ahead and gave up and without a fight because he felt bad. He didn't want that guard to get killed. He did not want that. It was a plan and went very, very wrong.
George Hyatt was charged with escaping custody and is still awaiting sentencing.
My brother is not a monster, and my brother did not pull that trigger. Jennifer did.
Jennifer Hyatt was charged with first-degree murder and facilitating the escape. Avoiding the death penalty by agreeing to testify against her husband, Jennifer was sentenced to life without parole. But perhaps her biggest punishment, this nurse turned killer will never see her husband again. On the run in Rio de Janeiro and safe from extradition to England, great train robber Ronald Biggs earns his living as a criminal celebrity. But there's still a price on his head, and a group of bounty hunters are planning to cash in on it. On March the 6th, 1981, Biggs is kidnapped by soldier of fortune John Miller and his team of 4.
They pounced on him, roped him up and kidnapped him, and got a little a light plane laid on where they flew him about 2,000 miles away, the other side of Brazil.
From the country's northern coast, the kidnappers sail for Barbados to turn Ronnie over for extradition back to Britain. But in a case scrutinised by the world's media, the ever-resourceful Biggs exploits a legal technicality, his Brazilian son, Michael, and his return to Brazil.
Before leaving Barbados, he told how he felt about squeezing through yet another legal loophole to freedom.
Completely, absolutely, 100% elated. But I was sort of thinking that lurking in the background there just might be the possibility of a return to dear old Blighted, and I was hoping that that wouldn't happen.
And finally, he boarded a privately chartered jet on which a New York agent was offering reporters for a mere £25,000 a time the chance to ride alongside Biggs as he returned home. His son Michael, whose existence enabled Ronald Biggs to avoid extradition some years ago, was at the airport to greet him. Asked how he felt to be back in Brazil once more, 6 weeks after his kidnapping, Biggs replied, not surprisingly, squashed.
He settles down again in Rio. But over the next 2 decades, public interest in Biggs wanes. The great train robber is no longer the human tourist attraction he once was. And in 2001, at the age of 72, strapped for cash and in ailing health, Ronald Biggs finally returns to England.
Morning. I have here in my possession a warrant for your arrest for being unlawfully at large from Her Majesty's Prison, Wandsworth. Ronald Arthur Biggs, I'm now going to formally arrest you.
So Ronald Biggs is on the plane paid for by the newspaper, lands in Britain. He's arrested by the Scotland Yard detective with a warrant which was outstanding from his original escape, and he ended up in Belmarsh Prison, which is the prison with the highest security rating in London.
Having suffered a series of strokes, Biggs is now bedridden.
The brain is perfect, the body is not. He'll never speak again, he will never eat or drink again. He gets fed by a tube that's inserted into his stomach. He'll never be able to walk properly again, he'll never read or write again, but his mind is intact.
Ronnie Biggs was not one of London Underworld's most successful criminals, but he was one of the most colourful characters. A small role in a big heist led to a life on the run for very little loot. After more than 3 decades on the run, Ronald Biggs is now confined to his prison bed. Next time, 4 escapes in 4 years. No wonder they called him Badness.
It's not a natural thing, a human being caged.
The world's first helicopter escape.
Well, we just didn't know what was happening at that time. You know, it was such an unusual thing to happen.
And a mass breakout from death row. The biggest in US history.
They were death row inmates. They had nothing to lose by killing us.